John, it's really nice to have you
Yaron,
here.
yeah, thank you, man.
Um,
Good to talk to you.
yeah, um, it's almost 10 years now, ish, since we met for the first time.
Mm,
And as I mentioned you before we spoke, today I had an interview and I was asked who has been a massive influence and inspiration for you. And I mentioned your name. So it's funny that we're talking, that I'm interviewing you now in the afternoon. It was important for me to introduce you to people who don't know you. And I want to spread the message that you shared with me that I'm continue to spread on, um, and to kind of check in because it's been a long time since we started
mm,
together. I mean, this journey you have a long time before that, and I'm sure that things have evolved. So I want to talk about things that are relevant for men, men in our community, which would be relationships, which I know you have, a big place in your heart and in your work for that,
uh-huh.
purpose, leadership, and everything else. And maybe grief as well, which is something
Mm,
that is hitting me right now. And I know that you had
yeah,
quite big experiences recently. So, my
yeah.
first question to you, my friend, what led you to start with this kind of work?
Mm. Well, failure, my own failures. That's how most men end up, I think, coming into men's work. They're feeling they want to experience something that they're not experiencing, and they don't quite know how or why they're not having the experiences that they want. And that's certainly what happened to me. Um, I was married, my mid 30s, had a child, um, nice little house in Westwood in LA, and on the surface, everything seemed good. But I realized I did not know what to do in relationships. I did not know how to make my marriage work. Um, I wasn't really doing the work in the world that I wanted to do. I wasn't taking great care of myself. It was just kind of this ongoing cluster of sort of mediocrity covered up with that only I knew. Like people who knew me thought, "You're doing great, man. You're doing great." And I guess I was, it's all relative, but I knew that there was more for me to do and be in the world. There was a lot more to give that I wasn't accessing. And I just kind of felt incomplete. So, after my marriage ended, I ended up finding David Data, who I studied with for a long time, and really just dove into that work with him, followed him around for 13 years and co-taught with him and assisted him, and then uh, as I went into doing work with David and I developed my own personal practice, men started to ask what it was that I was doing, and I started to get the impulse, kind of like the same way you came to my workshop and then got this impulse to lead other men. I had a very similar experience, and I realized as I've gone on through the years that everything that I'm working on in my personal life, in my relationships, in my business, in my world as a father, as a lover, as a partner, as a parent, as a leader, everything I'm working on is tends to be relevant for other men. So I'm just kind of like my own guinea pig. And then I what works for me, I tend to teach other men, and that's kind of how my life has developed.
You have to put it in bullet points, or not bullet points, or in a paragraph, whatever it is. What did you learn? You said, and I also wanted kind of to check in with you because you said what led you to this was failure. Was it really failure? And
Well,
and
that's
then
how I
and
was
then
describing it at the time. Yeah, yeah. I mean, the mask, one of the great things I learned from David was that the masculine grows through failure. Failure is the masculine way, right? To continually know that no matter what we're doing, we're really um, not complete. Like there's a constant state of incompleteness. There's a constant state of knowing that we could be doing more. There's a constant state of feeling like something could be better. This moment could be better. Our life could be better. All of that kind of stuff. And so that's really what I meant by failure, and that's certainly what brought me to this work. I mean, what I've learned over the years, I suppose, if I was going to encapsulate it, that being like living in my body and really doing everything that I can do in order to stay in my body is a beautiful success strategy for everything else in my life, right? So I've made a prioritization of being embodied, right? My programs are called Embodied, because I think that's the great dilemma, especially for men living up here, moving through the world in a thinking space versus a feeling space. And so moving through the world in an embodied place, more deeply connected to my core self, more deeply connected to the great she that is life, more
So
deeply connected to
I
consciousness.
want, on purpose, I'm just want to put a little break, because some men hear chi, even hear the word embodiment, and have no
Yeah.
freaking clue what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So what was that? What language did you use when you started the journey? Because I assume probably did you have that language back then when you started?
No, it developed, but I think the way I would define embodiment for your men, and I think they'll probably get this, right? We have awareness. Like we have awareness. That's one of the great tools of consciousness. We're conscious and we have awareness that we're conscious. We have awareness that we're in a moment. We have awareness that we have a body. We have awareness that we're in a conversation. We have awareness. And that's a key component to being alive. And I wrote about this in my book a lot, that the great practice is to combine awareness and sensitivity. So when we have our awareness on our thoughts, we are in our thoughts, not in our body, right? And so when we have awareness on the deeper parts of our body, our belly, our heart, the kind of core essence of us, some people might call it a soul, some people might call it consciousness, some people might call it God within. When our awareness is not on thought, but on the deeper parts of ourselves, the deeper aspects of ourselves, we're more embodied. So when I'm aware of my feet on the ground, I'm literally embodying groundedness. When I'm aware of the deep, tender part of my heart, I'm embodying heart, right? And so embodiment means to bring our awareness into the body, not just the mind. And this other way I would define embodiment is to bring aspects of being, like concepts like fierce love, or concepts like devotion, or concepts like desire, or what I mean, you name it, like warriorhood, king. When we make those aspects, those archetypes real in our body so that we feel it, other people feel it, we're embodied. So embodiment is the practice of literally making your body an instrument of presence. I mean, to be present as an embodied state is about making your body an instrument of conscious, grounded presence. And that is actually a practice that we can get better at. A lot of men don't even recognize, like, oh, that's something that I can actually practice. I can practice grounding. I can practice, deepening my breath and deepening my sensation in my body. I can practice being tethered to consciousness. I can practice feeling more. I can turn up my senses. I can practice these things, and I will actually become more present. And people will feel it, and they will trust me more. And women will trust me more, and other men will trust me more. And so I think the great learning for me was that that was possible. Like nobody really teaches us that. I mean, unless you've grown up in some very special
Yeah.
communities. Yeah.
It's really interesting because I had a massive insight recently, because I had struggled with money and the business and all these things were challenging for me. And suddenly I had an insight about the embodiment of it when I was, and I shared it with a few people recently, when I was 14, 15, and I started to play drums, I knew that I'm going to play with Phil Collins and Sting. There was no
Mm,
doubt in me. And I
mm, mm,
embodied that feeling like I am a
mm,
kick-ass drummer.
mhm,
And I start to walk like this and be like
mhm,
this and breathe like
mhm,
this. And then I
mhm,
moved to Tel Aviv and I started to hang around in the Tel Aviv environment. And I was like getting gigs because I was the fucking drummer of Phil Collins and Sting in my mind, but it projected something. And
mhm,
I never met them, I never toured with them, but I have toured literally all over the world with incredible artists on the biggest stages, performed probably in front of over 1 million people.
mm.
So maybe the practice of that showed me that I've done this before. So why not to embody now something else around the business? Like how would that be to be as So
Mm.
it was a massive, massive insight for me. The question that I have for you, though.
Well, let me say one thing about that because I think this is really powerful for men to get.
Mm,
Pick a fucking trait.
yeah,
Pick something you want to experience more, and then literally decide to fill your body with it. It could be confidence, could
yeah,
be groundedness, it could be like you were talking about, badass. Like your body can literally take the shape of badass, right?
yeah,
You've seen these things where the surgeon puts their hand, the Superman pose that that people do. But if you
yeah, yeah.
stand like Superman, you will literally. They measure this now. You will literally get more confident. Your heart changes its rhythm. Your brain waves change. Your being changes based on what you decide to do with your body. So for men, if they're just looking for a quick hack, pick a trait you want to, experience more in your life, and then literally use your breath, especially your exhale, to spread that trait through every cell of your body. And it takes 3 minutes, totally changes your state, totally change. And as you say, you then project that trait and people feel you. Like you walk into a room and people are like, oh, that guy's
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
guy's badass. I mean,
Mm.
they don't even know why. And you could do this in your relationship. You could embody, powerful love. You could embody dark love. You can embody devotion. You can, your body really has so much capacity for expression, for expression. And when we consciously choose what we want to express through our body, rather than just kind of be victim to the patterns of our childhood and our life, then we are empowered in new and really spectacular ways.
An important word that you mentioned is practice, because again, for me, being a drummer, I had to practice. So the concept of practicing something daily was very familiar for me.
Mhm.
But I see that for so many people, as you said, we don't
Yeah.
get that. So it's really important to ingrain that in the way we do life. My question for you is like, why is it so hard for men to do this? To come out of the head and to go into the body?
Yeah, there's so much momentum, to stay in the head, to strategize, to think things through. And quite honestly, it's painful to be in the body sometimes, right?
Mm,
Like you've just had this really, traumatic experience, happen in your homeland, right? And if you were to really, go into your body and feel what's there, it would likely be painful, right?
mm,
And most of us are carrying various levels of trauma, various levels of fear, various levels of, anxiety, grief. And to be in the body requires that we actually feel what's in the body. And, men would much rather strategize on winning than really be in the truth of what's happening in their bodies and their hearts. And the irony is that especially in relationships, the victory comes, the level of relating elevates when you are more fully in the body, right? People just trust you more. People want to pay you more. People want to be around you. People want to get to know you. It's because you're not just this kind of talking head that's thinking, mostly about yourself, mostly about yourself and your problems and your dramas and your whatever it is. So there is it's very hard to get men to see the value of grounded embodied presence until they feel it.
Mm.
And I think you've probably had this experience too, where you've taken men through exercises where you've got to hold them for 10, 15, 20 minutes in a state where they really get to tap what it's like to be fully present with another man or fully present with a woman, and what that does to the connection, what that does to the depth. And once you get that experience, it becomes, you know, I won't say addictive, but just it becomes a reason to live in a different way.
And how can we bridge that for men? Because, you know, we're contradicting ourselves in a way. We say that this is what embodiments to go into the body, but sometimes it's so hard and so painful to feel. And this is for men, it's like, fuck me, man, let me
Yeah.
strategize. So
Yeah.
how to close the gap there? Because you and I know that if more men do this kind of work, their lives will be better and the ripple effect will go on. And the
Yeah.
men that usually join this circle stay because they see the value in it. But
Yeah.
it's to bring the newcomers, it's always like, oh shit, what's going on here? So
Yeah.
how do you
Yeah. I
bridge
mean,
that?
well, it's usually the question that I started with in the very beginning, which is what are you wanting to experience that you're not experiencing? And almost always there is some element uh, of embodiment. For example, let's say somebody wants to experience more abundance, more financial freedom, more wealth, right? That is something that can be felt right now,
Mm.
right? Versus waiting for some sort of circumstantial external circumstance to happen, $1 million check coming your way, right?
Mm.
The funny thing is that when men succeed, they often can't appreciate it because they really don't understand that the mechanism of dopamine production, serotonin production, like literally the mechanisms of happiness in the nervous system in the brain happen through body mind awareness. So literally, happiness happens through the body. Happiness happens through love, happens through the body. Joy happens through the body. Like everything that we're wanting to feel happens through the body. And so, I think the best way we can keep attracting men to this work is keep doing the work ourselves.
Mm.
Just continue to be an example of what, a grounded, present, integral, loving man is, be an example of what leadership is, be an example of what, love and consciousness is. And more and more men, I'm having the experience all the time of just more and more and more and more and more very successful men even I had a call the other day with a guy who's head of a very big organization here in the States, and has all kinds of teachers and and he's wanting to know about men's work, right?
Mm.
Because I think men are waking up to the fact that there is a deeper way for them to live, and I don't think it takes much for them to feel that. So I have hope and faith that men are waking up in ways that I woke up, right? I mean, I have no judgment. I was fucking as lost as anybody. I still am in many ways, still figuring it out myself.
Yeah.
So,
What about your teaching? How has your teaching changed? Because
mm,
I still don't know
yeah.
if that weekend that we had in London long time ago, was that actually
Mhm.
the first time you ran like a full weekend?
Yeah. Yeah. That was my very first workshop you were at.
So
2014, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
yeah, 14 or 15. But
Yeah.
so I remember that because that weekend changed my life, completely. And I tell the story about how I came there because I don't know if you remember, but my interaction with you before at Rich Litvin's event when we spoke, because I heard the way I was introduced to this work was I heard Rich Litvin kind of grilling constantly, like my men's group, my men's group, my men's group. And back then I was like, what the fuck is a men's group? But the way he spoke about it, and then I saw the people involved, like you and some others, I was like, these guys I see as really positive role models. This is the type of space I want to be in. And there was something about this, masculine, feminine, quite balanced, or wanting to be balanced, at least doing the work towards that really attracted me. And then I remember we had this conversation. I don't know if you remember that, by the way. We had this conversation at the event of Rich Litvin, and I didn't connect with you at all.
Yeah.
At all. And then we had the chat after that at your place when you came to London. And
Yeah,
then I felt your heart like big time. And then I came late to the workshop, but that weekend was incredible. Now, it's interesting now because in July, now a few months ago, I was in this workshop that you hosted here in London again. And things have slightly changed, let's put it this way, which was great to see. And I'll share this with you, because, I like to be very honest. I was concerned before I came to the weekend because you're kind of almost a celebrity right now. And I was like, oh, shit, is this going to start to be kind of something kind of big and so on? And it was big, but I felt your heart 100% there. I felt your leadership. The same thing that I felt in that small room, I felt with the big space. And I loved seeing your joy and passion of doing this work because you're really, it's your home. It's beautiful. So
thank you.
So having seen the first one, the pleasure of seeing the first one and where you are right now, if you're reflecting back, what has changed in the way that you guide people, in the way that you work with people?
Yeah. Well, I think for men, one of the things that has changed is that I am so much more convinced that our work is to connect to, support, and amplify the feminine in the world, right? And I believe that the feminine is rising as a power in the world, and the feminine is like the great, whether you're talking about nature, whether you're talking about the rise of women, whether you're talking about love and life itself, like there is a very profound devotion to life, to her. When I say her, I'm talking about all feminine, right? The feminine in us, the feminine in the form of women or feminine identified beings, the nature itself, life itself, love itself. And so I think that one of the things that's really changed is that I've learned myself that it's much better to serve the feminine than try to control or dominate or get from the feminine, right? And I think that's where a lot of men run into trouble is they're wanting to get from life, they're wanting to get from women, they're wanting to get certain kinds of energies. They're really in this state of like hungry ghost, right? More and more and more, and that is just an empty hole. That's a black fucking hole. And so really teaching men to draw from nature, for example. I spend a lot, like most of the time, like that was the first urban workshop I'd done in years, man. It was like most of my workshops I'm doing out in nature, in the middle of the desert, in the mountains, you know what I mean? Like I'm doing many of my workshops in here in Sedona, like I'm doing many of my workshops in nature because I want men to feel how much juice is available when we tap into it. And most guys I know are malnourished, man. They're exhausted, they're burdened, they're like stressed, right? They need juice. Where do we get the juice? From her. Not just our romantic partners, but from life itself. And when we can practice, like we're talking about, we can practice becoming receptive to the the incredible juice that's around us, we are full. And we bring that fullness to our partners. We bring that fullness to our community. We bring that fullness to our friends, to the people we lead, versus trying to get. And so getting full, is a day by day practice that I think men really respond to once they kind of understand how to do it.
Just to be clear, for men who might not understand it, what do you mean when you say her and the feminine? What's the definition for someone who doesn't understand that?
Yeah. So the universe, let's just say the universe is broken up into aspects of energy and nothingness. If you drill down to an atom is basically just empty space, and then electrons and protons and neutrons, energy, right? So at its core, the entire universe, you and me, we are basically energy and space. That's it. Energy and space. Even our tissue, which seems dense, is filled with space. So the entire natural world is filled with emptiness, which we would call the masculine aspect of the universe, and energy, right? This is quantum physics is proving. I mean, this is so proven by now. We just don't want to think about it. And so the feminine is the energy of life, the energy of the universe, the energy, right? And the masculine is the stillness, the emptiness, the conscious depth, right? And so when we're talking about getting juice from the energy of life, we're literally making our bodies, through practice, yogic practice, meditative practice, martial arts practice, other embodied practices, everything from qigong to yoga to all kinds of other sort of really beautiful practices. We're making our bodies more receptive to the energy which is all around us. When we are stuck in our head, thinking, our bodies are literally not receptive. If you just go to the most beautiful spot in nature, sit on a rock for 30 minutes and just allow yourself to receive the moment from that rock, you will likely get up from that rock feeling more enlivened, inspired, relaxed, all of those things. What's happened? You've received the energy of life in your body. And so her is the energy of life, and everything that is, right? It could be the ocean, could be the rivers, could be the mountains, could be your feminine partner, could be your children, could be, anything that's energy. That's the feminine. And when we get receptive and still, we can receive that energy in very profound ways, and it's incredibly nourishing.
I'm very grateful for my dog. I have a dog now for almost 2 years, and because of him, I have to go to nature every day for an hour walk. We have a beautiful forest, and it's been amazing because it was the first time for me to see a space changing all the seasons. And it's incredible to see. It's like such a different place all the time. And it is true, every day I'll go there, and I always come out more relaxed. There is a quote, actually, somebody put a quote. There's a sign there on the forest, and I'm going to probably mess it up, but it's something like, I can't remember it. It's something like, I came into the forest. Anyway, it's something like you go into the forest something, and then I came out taller than the trees. And it is a little bit the feeling that you get sometimes, which is beautiful.
I mean, I had it, one of the practices I think I had you guys do one of the first years we were in London was to go sit in that park in Angel, right? And feel deeply within yourself and to the core essence of you that's unchanging, but also feel everything going on in the park. You don't have to be in nature. You can just sit in the middle of a park and listen to feel the children playing, feel the grass, feel the sounds, right? At any moment, there is so much going on. Life is happening at such an incredible, miraculous fucking level. If we turn our awareness away from strategizing and thinking, which we only need to do really 5 or 10% of the time, right? And we put our awareness on the incredible amount of energy that's just pulsing. The universe is pulsing all the fucking time with energy. that spiritual practice, I call that spiritual practice. That spiritual practice changes our state of being in very measurable ways. Just for the guy, for this, because there's so many dudes here, your dopamine levels increase, your testosterone levels increase, your serotonin levels increase, your blood pressure goes down, your heart rate, goes down. It's your whole state changes for the better when you can do these practices. And you can't tell me that doesn't make you happier, more attractive, more inspired, more enlivened, more, ready to take on the world.
The 2 points you mentioned, that park in Angel. First of all, I get the value of taking people to nature, absolutely, but I see also the value of doing this in the middle of that crazy shit that people go through every day, and to do the practice there is a huge value to that. But talking about, you made a great connection. That park, don't know if you remember that one time that I was assisting, and I came to you first thing in the morning when we met, just the team, the facilitators, and I told you, John, I'm on the fucking edge, and I didn't know what that means, but I felt that I don't know, something is very bubbly. And then we did some practice, which I really appreciated because it helped me ground myself. Then we went into the room and something happened there, and you asked everybody, okay, anybody needs any attention? And I didn't want to share because I felt like, oh, suddenly it goes up again. And I didn't share. And then I came to you to the side. I told you, John, I'm on the edge again. And you got pissed off with me, I remember, for a good reason, because I should have shared it before. And then I had to do a fucking practice that I really didn't want to do in front of 35 men. And it was really, really hard. Now that I'm bringing that to you now as a facilitator, because it's something that I have, and I'm sure that you have the concern around that. The practices that we do in this space can be really fucking intense and can really scratch some edges, and it can be scary, despite the fact that we know what we're doing and so on, and it's stuff that we went through ourselves. How do you cope with that? How do you feel? I've seen you, for example, in July running 80 people into crazy practices. And how do you manage yourself in these spaces?
Well, and I think this is something men will get. The more we want to experience, the more love we want to experience, the more abundance we want to experience, the more sexual energy we want to experience, the more we want to experience, we have to train our nervous systems to be able to hold it. So we cannot hold more intimacy than our nervous systems can take. We cannot hold more sexual energy. We can't hold more abundance than our nervous systems are trained to take. And so training all these practices that we're kind of alluding to, even like edge practices, like the one that you're just talking about, those edge practices are meant to expand your nervous system capacity to hold more energy. So over the years, I've done enough of these practices that when I'm in the middle of 80 people doing, a wild love practice, right? That was so much fun. I love my job. When I'm in the middle of a room doing that, my nervous system has been trained to feel the stillness of the moment and then feel the energy of the moment and use my breath and use my body to circulate it, to move it, so to speak, right? And that's just something that I've been trained. Now, anybody can train themselves to do that. I was just another, bozo on the bus, when I started, 15 years ago. So anybody can train themselves to do that, to hold all of your children's energy without cracking, to hold all of your, your partner's energy without cracking, right? Without, and that takes nervous system training. That takes nervous system training. And, the good news is that throughout the millennia, people have been cultivating these practices. I mean, there's ancient martial arts practices, there's ancient shamanic practices, there's ancient Toltec practices. I practice a lot of Tibetan Buddhism practices, right? So there's breath and body work abound to train our nervous systems to be able to hold more energy. And so if we tap into those practices and just dedicate ourselves, the payoff, to your question earlier about how do we convince men to get more into the work, the payoff is that your nervous system gets much stronger and you're just able to hold so much more. And I think most men get the value of that.
What would be the for a guy that just hears about all this for the first time, what would be a starter practice that you would recommend?
Grounding.
Which
A
means
grounding
what?
practice. Yeah. So the way I would describe grounding is literally imagine pressing your energy down, shoulders down through your hips down through your feet down into the earth, right? And just imagine everything pushing down into the earth, and then begin to breathe into the very bottom of your belly, your pelvic bowl. Pelvic bowl is like this, the bottom of a balloon, let's say. And imagine that pelvic bowl touching down into the earth. Do that for about 2 or 3 minutes. Every exhale, you ground. Every inhale, you ground. And it's just this simple 2-3 minute practice. Totally changes your body's brain chemistry, your body chemistry, your hormones, everything. And so, and I can see it, like in a co-ed workshop where you were. If I put a man doing that in front of a woman and he did it for 2 or 3 minutes, she would immediately trust him more. His number would go from let's say a 3 or 4 to a 7 or an 8, just by doing 2 or 3 minutes of grounding practice. Because his nervous system, when he does that, his nervous system goes from a sympathetic nervous system, which is the kind of, what's wrong, what do I got to protect against? That's the sympathetic nervous system, to a parasympathetic nervous system, which is much more down regulated and even. So flow states, great flow states, Stephen Kotler's great book on flow. He's basically talking about how do we get into parasympathetic nervous states so that we can be in flow, right? Flow with energy, flow with the great her, right? Hopefully you put it together. How do we get in flow? We ground, we breathe, we slow our bodies, and our nervous system corresponds to that, and then we're able to do way much more than we could if we were in a rattled state of our nervous systems were rattled. And most men get this, Yaron. You know what I mean? Like most men, when you kind of put it, that they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, but but then they forget to breathe.
Yeah, it comes back to the practice of practice in the end.
Mm-hmm. Let me just say one thing, man. You became a world-class drummer by practicing what? How many hours do you think you practiced? Probably
I was shit at practice. I was really shit at practice, probably. And now at the beginning more, but I was not a very big. I was practicing the embodiment. It's a good question, because I didn't sit for hours with sticks and but I remember. Actually, this is a great question, because I remember when I had my teacher in Tel Aviv. It was like that teacher, David Rich. He was the guy that you go to when you. So I traveled all the way from Haifa to Tel Aviv. And I remember waiting in the bus stop, in the train station, visualizing the exercises, because it's all coordination exercise. Your foot, one foot does this, the other foot this, then one hand, one hand, and then you have to speak at the same time or sing. It's like, I was really like feeling the embodiment of that. And what I've noticed so many times, that when I actually came to the instrument, well, not always, but a lot of times, okay, I kind of have it without actually doing the thing, which is equivalent to me to this, again, I performed when I was 15 in my bedroom at my parents' house. I was performing in front of 20,000 people. It was like, I was like fully in it. So, yeah.
I would still argue that over the course of the years, you've had thousands of hours of practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so that's what I think men need to get. If you want to master something, like you've mastered the drums, you've mastered that art, right? And of course you can always do more, and you can always get better. But you're a master of that art. And if you want to master the art of presence, or the art of loving, or the art of sexual artistry, right? You want to master the art of intimacy. It takes practice. I mean, it's like, you want to be a great tennis player, you got to fucking practice. You want to be a great lover, you've got to practice. You want to be a great, you want to be able to be an embodied leader, you have to practice embodied leadership. And, you got to practice.
Yeah, but I think
it's no magic fucking pill.
No, but it's important also to say that to understand that you are already practicing something. You're already
Right.
practicing being miserable. You're practicing being not enough. You're practicing that, telling yourself all day, thinking about
Yeah.
that. Then you're practicing that. And this is really important to understand that everybody that listens to it does some kind of, it's not like we're introducing something new. It's to build
Yeah.
awareness of like, what are you spending time with, thinking about, spending time
Yeah.
interacting with. We all do that. It's just a matter of choice as well.
That's a great point, right? We are practicing something, and most of us are practicing trying to get what we want through some kind of strategy.
Yeah.
And most of the time it doesn't pay the dividends that a deeper level of practice would pay.
Which comes back to a word that you used at the beginning, it's awareness. To understand that, okay, I have a choice here. Don't have too much time. I could speak to you for hours, man. Let me just ask this few more questions. Relationship is something that is so big for you and so much in your heart. Why? There are so many themes in men's group. There's so many things you can go to, but the intimacy and relationship and sexuality and all these things
Yeah.
are so treasured for you. Why?
Well, I mean, I believe in love. I believe that love is the answer to so much of the misery that we experience. And that could be self-love, it could be love of another, it could be love as a parent, it could be, but love, and the act of loving is not, and this isn't new. I didn't come up with this. I mean, mystics, Rumi, Rilke, Ram Dass, I mean, it's that love is that which makes the world go round, right? And so becoming an artist of love has been something that I wanted to dedicate myself to, partly because I wasn't raised with that. There was, my family of origin was, lots of divorce and lots of shitty relationships. And so that wound became the inspiration for me to change that. And, I can say, with total sincerity that I'm experiencing the kind of love now in my relationship that I've, that makes me so happy to be alive and so joyful and so much more um, so much more to give. So love is the answer, man. And I'm happy to be a proponent of love, an artist of love, a practitioner of love, a teacher of love. I could not have written the script any better.
I'm going to take it to a very different space now because of the thing that I'm experiencing these days. And I know that you had some big experiences with grief.
Yeah.
What would you recommend men who go through grief, through that tough, uncomfortable experience? What helped you and what would you recommend as a practice for that?
Yeah. A lot of men go through that. So let's go back to the feminine, right? Grief, emotion is our feminine. Any emotion is our part of our feminine. Our love is our feminine, right? And so what what I believe the masculine is here to do is to hold and amplify the feminine. So what that would mean is if you are a man who's in grief, that you create space to both hold and amplify the expression of that grief, right? Just like if you with your child, right? If you had your child was upset about something, you wouldn't be like, shut up, Johnny, right? You know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't, you shouldn't do that. I don't think you should, but you want to give them space to be fully expressed, right? Like that's the masculine giving space. Like, okay, get it out. Like, oh, yeah, have a tantrum. Like, get it out, get it out, get it out. And so for yourself, and this is where men run into a lot of problems, is that they don't give themselves permission and create a container, which could just be 10 minutes a day, to really feel and amplify and express what's true. Grief often is a big one. Grief, loneliness, self-loathing, anger, all of those things. So what I recommend to men is to create a container, in the morning. You can, after you do your practice, create a space, put on some music, and give yourself 10 minutes to grieve. Like, feel it, make sound, move, pound on the floor, pound on your chest. Like, you literally give you give your feminine permission to be fully expressed. And in doing that, there is an aliveness and a fullness that actually happens even while we're in very painful emotions. After a deep cry, there's almost like a sense of not quite joy, but it's peace, maybe.
Yeah.
Like a peace. And so for men who are experiencing grief, what I would say is give yourself space to grieve. When my daughter died, I literally canceled my mornings so I could have 2 hours a morning or so to grieve. And I would just look at pictures of her, and I would watch videos of her, and she was all over the internet, so that everywhere I turned there was stuff with Claire. And I gave myself permission to just go in, and I had to do that for about 2 or 3 years of just I literally took 3 months off of work and went to Hawaii to be with a teacher of mine who took me through a grieving process. I created that container to grieve. So that's where I feel men can be supported in this work right away, is by whatever's true, whatever feeling you haven't felt fully, but it's there. Give yourself space, create a container and a ritual for you to feel it. The masculine is the container. 10 minutes. I'm going to do this. The masculine is the container. The expression is the feminine. And that's a good way to put that, that idea into practice.
Beautiful. Thank you. 2 quick questions to wrap things up. One is, you mentioned quite a lot, but if you had to pick your top teachers in life, your biggest inspirations, who would they be?
Yeah. Well, data, of course, has been incredibly important to my learnings in so many ways. So many ways. Really amazing teacher. My daughter, Claire. My partner, Madeline. The women in my life have taught me a lot. There's a man named Cass Phelps who I went to Hawaii to study with, who is wonderful, and he's one of those sort of secret masters. Teaches a certain kind of movement practice and flow practice that is so beautiful. So Cass is definitely somebody who's been a real, not only great inspiration for me, but a huge support in helping me when I was going through some really intense stuff. So.
Nice.
Yeah.
And last question, my friend. If you had 15 minutes to live, and I give you the screen to transmit to all the computers on planet Earth, what is your most important message? What's the thing you want to leave behind?
Blast out love. Like, whatever you think, like, blast out love to everybody. Like, just go over the top, like, in text messages, in phone calls, in hugs, in kisses, in every opportunity you get to express love, double or triple the expression of it. Like, go way beyond what you think you can do, go way beyond what you think the other person will take, go way beyond what the habit of loving is, and blast out love. And that will change not only your life, but the lives of so many people around you.
There is no better way to end this. Big thank you, my friend. It's always a pleasure to meet you, and it's really nice to hear you, and I feel great now after this time. So
good. I'm so glad, Yaron. I wish you all the best with your event, and anytime, man, love to talk to you.
Thank you.